Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Seth Joyner Show. Today is a Talk to 'em Tuesday. I'm taking your questions, answering all of your questions regarding your Philadelphia Eagles, regarding what's going on in the NFL right now. So 1 hour, just you and me, taking your questions, talking your birds, talking your concerns, talking what you like as the season begins to wrap up. The off season, I should say, OTAs, et cetera, et cetera. We look forward to training camp. Before we get started, I want to pay my respects to the Fossil family. Former NFL head coach of the New York Giants, Jim Fossil, passed away at 71. Want to wish condolences to his son, Jim, special teams coach for the LA Rams, and his entire family. Also want to congratulate the Greek. That's all we called him in Denver when I was there. Head trainer for the Denver Broncos. Been in that position for the last 45 years. Is retiring. Just want to wish him a happy retirement. Waiting for you guys to file in and give me some questions to answer here. But the big topic, big question going on, not necessarily a question, but biggest move that has happened in free agency. Julio Jones is traded from the Atlanta Falcons over to the Tennessee Titans for a 2 and a 4. And in exchange, the Falcons also get back, the Tennessee Titans get a 6 back. I want to know your thoughts on that, what you guys think about Julio Jones on the move, what that wide receiver tandem is going to look like with A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, and the running game and the wide receivers and all the players that will now be at their disposal. Let's talk about also the salary cap situation and where the Tennessee Titans are at this moment. This move somewhat puts them in a win now mode because you got Derrick Henry, whose contract is going to be up soon if he hasn't already been re-upped. When you think about $15 million against your cap, and this young man, Julio Jones, being on your roster potentially next year, what does that do to the long-term prognosis of your team, of your organization, and how you manage your salary cap? Time will tell. All right, we're starting to get some questions to flow in here on this Talk to 'em Tuesday. Alex wants to know, do you think that Zach Ertz will be traded? That's interesting because somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I believe that the Eagles and Zach Ertz can work out what their issues are. Now, a lot will depend upon where the Eagles are financially from a salary cap standpoint, whether they decide to keep Zach Ertz on the roster. I just think that this guy had a bad year last year. They know his worth, they know his value, and teams know that they're in the market to move on, and they're not offering much for a Zach Ertz. Now, you just can't give him away. He's going to count against your salary cap to a certain extent anyway. Will it be worth it to keep him on the roster and just bolster the weapons that the Philadelphia Eagles have and Jalen Hurts will have at his disposal next year? I don't see any reason why they have to trade him unless he doesn't want to be here, unless he's still, staunch on his stance that he wants a new contract. If he's traded, given the way that he played last year, no other team in the NFL is going to give him an extension at this point. The Eagles, in my opinion, are better off with a Zach Ertz for this year. Zach Ertz, in my opinion, is better off being with the Eagles this year. What it allows him to do is go back out and prove that he is going to be, that he still can produce and get done, what he's done in the past, therefore raising his value and giving the Eagles the opportunity to recoup something in return rather than just giving him away for little or nothing. Time will tell. We'll see where all of that goes. All right, let's see who else we got. You guys having these conversations internally among yourselves. Give me some questions that I can answer on here. Let's see. All right, you want to go? He wants to talk some Sixers and how interesting this matchup between the Sixers and the Hawks tonight. He says Sixers or Hawks tonight. Overall, who takes the series? How many wide receivers the Eagles keep this year? And do it. I like the depth at the position. Red Sand, what's happening with you, man? Listen, this is a must game, in my opinion, for the 76ers. You've already lost home court advantage by losing game one. They've got to figure out a way to get Trae Young under control. And I believe they'll come out with much more energy in the game tonight. Hard for me to go against Philly, man. Hard for me to go against Embiid. I know he's not 100%, but it speaks volumes that he's out there giving the effort and putting himself out there. I didn't think he'd play anymore. I thought that his season was over. I've had that injury before, and I know that once you have it, until you get it fixed, it's not something that you're going to necessarily feel 100% from at any point in time until you have the surgery and you go through the rehab. But, I take my hat off. I tip my hat to him that he's even out there. I think they're better off with him on the floor than without. And if the doctors feel like there's no further damage can be done, then by all means, let's see him out there. But the Sixers absolutely have to have this game tonight. There is no doubt about it. And I'm picking the Sixers to win tonight in a big way. You want to know about the wide receivers. I mean, how many wide receivers? I mean, realistically, you probably can't keep any more than maybe 4 or 5 wide receivers. And that fifth wide receiver probably will have to, be a special teams guy, either return guy or a guy that can cover on kickoff and cover on punt. So it'll be interesting because, for the first time you asked about depth. In my opinion, they've got depth. In my opinion, they've got some guys, that can create competition at the wide receiver spot. Listen, that Jalen Reagor is going to be there. That Devontae Smith is going to be there. You want to say that there's going to be competition in the slot with Greg Ward this year, but, you still got Quez Watkins. You still got John Hightower. These guys are first-year guys that were just drafted last year that really didn't have much development. And we really don't know who and what they are. In my opinion, some of these guys are only going to get this season, this preseason, to really show what it is that they can do. I've seen teams keep 6 wide receivers on the roster. It's highly unlikely. But given the circumstances and given the youth and the depth that they have at the wide receiver position, I didn't even mention Travis Fulgham. I mean, here's a guy that, probably could and should be a starter, but, because of Alshon Jeffrey, his role last year was diminished. And in a lot of ways, his growth was arrested. So they've got more depth and more talent and more ability at the wide receiver position than they've had in a very long time. Problem is, you can only keep so many guys, and these guys have got to grow up and show out real quick, because this year is going to be similar to last year in some regards. You're only going to get 3 preseason games. You'll get a full training camp. The first round of OTAs have just wrapped up, so the coaches are getting a look. But I would think that a guy like Nick Sirianni wants to keep as many young guys, especially wide receivers, on the roster as he possibly can, because he's probably got a 3 to 5 year window in which to deal with. And these guys are only going to grow. They're only going to get better as time goes on. All right, Red? Let's see. In keeping with the wide receiver theme, Jonathan Granger wants to know, do you think we need a veteran wide receiver? That's an interesting question. I had a debate not long ago talking about the Julio Jones scenario and why it would be good and why it wouldn't be good for the Eagles to make that trade. Normally, in my NFL, the NFL that I grew up in, it was incumbent that you had veteran players around to kind of lead the young players into how to be professionals and how to conduct their business and how to make the transition from college into, the professional life of the NFL. I don't know that today's coaches really believe in that so much as they believe in themselves to be the conduit to help these young guys grow. At some positions, you have coaches who never played in the NFL that are trying to teach guys and tell guys how to play the game that they never played before. That doesn't mean that they can't be good coaches, but it's really hard to tell somebody how to do something that you've never stepped in their shoes and done what you're trying to teach them to do. It's difficult. But this is just the new NFL. I think there's a lot of things that are new about the NFL that for a lot of people is quite perplexing. The youth in coaching, the youth as players, the salary cap has facilitated the situation to the point where, you don't see guys that are 32 to 35 years old playing in the league anymore unless they're a quarterback, and they're still getting it done. The belief is that once a player reaches the age of 30, that he's on the downside of his career. So more times than not, what you see is organizations that are pretty much at 29 years of age, they're beginning to look for the replacement of players in certain positions. So I don't know. Jonathan, I would say yes. I would love to have a guy that could teach these young wide receivers how to run routes, how to identify coverages, how to identify, the disguises in coverage, how to be a good player on and off the field. Someone who can help them mature beyond just the football field, but in life. But I'm not so sure that organizations nor coaching staffs really see any value in that anymore because of the limit put on time that you can spend with your player and, the monetary side of it. An older wide receiver is going to want to be paid. And when you don't have the salary cap space, that makes it that much more difficult to keep older players on your roster. Great question. My man Lawrence Melton wants to know, how do you view the D-line shaping up? I like where the defensive line is. I think it's very intriguing what you're about to see because we draft Milton Williams in the third round. When I watched this kid play, he was dominant at the defensive tackle position. From what I understand, he put on some weight, and the Eagles have drafted him to play defensive tackle. But if you look at his frame and if he can't maintain his weight, I like this kid as a defensive end. Now, most organizations don't necessarily call defensive ends anymore. They're, edge rushers. But I think the edge rusher is the guy that basically plays on the weak side. The guy that you put, as defensive end in today's scheme, that's the guy that plays on the strong side or on the tight end side, primarily on the left side of the defense. The depth is there, which is good. The competition level will be ratcheted up this year, in my opinion, because of the 2 draft picks at edge rusher. You've got more depth there. Obviously, the injury situation is always a concern because if you don't have enough depth at each and every position, sometimes you're one lost player away from being in a situation where you just, your defensive line or that position is decimated. So it'll be interesting to see during training camp how all this shakes out. What happens with Hassan Ridgeway? Does he finally step into, his role? You've got the kid out of USC who I absolutely love. So there's going to be enough competition at the position but there's also enough depth at the position to a certain extent, just in case, you lose a guy here or there. But, right now, the Eagles have always been, I mean, you go back to, the Jim Jones era. They've always been a team that was, built upon the defensive line and how you could dominate the line of scrimmage. And I agree. I believe that if you don't have a great defensive line, it's hard for you to control the line of scrimmage. And if you can't control the line of scrimmage, then that means you're probably not going to win the football game in any phase. Interesting question came up today. I saw some talk about Fletcher Cox going around in Eagle land, and the Eagles questioning whether he's doing enough to be the best Fletcher Cox that he can be. And any of you guys who watch me on NBC Sports Philadelphia in postgame, I mean, even sometimes even in pregame, you know how I feel about Fletcher Cox. I think that he can be one of the most dominating defensive tackles in the NFL if he did all the requisite things that was necessary for him to step into that role. He wants to be talked about in the same light as an Aaron Donald. But when you look at Aaron Donald and how he prepares his body for each season, there's a stark difference. When you look at the amount of plays per game that Aaron Donald plays in opposed to Fletcher Cox, there's a stark difference. When you see the level of intensity and the guy that shows up every single week for 16, 17 weeks, there's a stark difference between the guy of Aaron Donald and Fletcher Cox. So if you want to be spoken about in the same light, then you must perform and you must prepare and you must get yourself ready in the same light. Now, it's not a good thing, when the organization that pays you begin to doubt that, you're doing everything that's necessary to get ready. Sometimes, organizationally, you have to take these things into conversation and into consideration, I should say, excuse me. But I can remember years ago, I heard Fletcher Cox say, hey, I don't really love football. Well, how do you draft a guy in the first round that doesn't love football? How do you pay a guy $100 million over 5 years, $20 million on average, that doesn't really love the game of football? Okay. I would have some serious reservations organizationally about making that move for a guy who says he doesn't love it and a guy who doesn't really care about the game the way that, a professional should. Sometimes, and it's a situation of the salary cap. There's so much money in the NFL now that, your good players, you have to pay them to keep them. And your good players, will require to be paid, on average, like the best players at their position throughout the league. But I think that there are players in the league also that are after a payday. I'm not saying that that's Fletcher Cox. I mean, has he lived up to, earning what he's earned? That's not for me to say. I'm not the guy that writes the check. Jeffrey Lurie is the guy that writes the check. And organizationally, I guess they felt like, that was the case. But now he's within a year or two of his deal being done. And now the conversation is being had. Okay, what do we do with Fletcher Cox? Do we re-up him? Do we give him another deal? Let's now look at all the small logistical things and all the dynamics of everything else that surrounds it. Now they're beginning to talk about and doubt whether he's really committed to the game, committed to getting his body in shape, committed, to doing whatever is necessary to be, a cornerstone of this organization going forward. He's approaching 30 years old. That magic number that I always talk about, organizations, when they get there, they begin to consider and talk about, okay, how much longevity does this guy actually have? Listen, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Fletcher Cox can be one of the most dominant players in the NFL if he got himself in shape. If he got himself in shape to the point where he could play 65 to 70% of the plays. Aaron Donald plays upwards of 70% of the plays every single year. The more you play, the more dominant you can be. There's this mindset now that, hey, what we want to do is we want to, pull back on the amount of plays that we give a player. We want to manage their time on the field, manage how much they practice. Well, you know what? When you're not practicing, it's hard for you to get better. It's hard for the game to just come naturally to you. When you're not preparing the way you need to prepare, it creates self-doubt to the point where you know that you're not ready as a professional athlete. You know that you can't perform at your highest level as a professional athlete because you're not ready, because you haven't prepared yourself, because you haven't given the requisite work. You haven't put in the requisite work to be able to play at the highest level. Now the Philadelphia Eagles have put up with it for the last 3 years of this contract. Now they begin to have conversations about it, and they're outwardly speaking about it, that the organization, they're letting that kind of talk seep out and slip out. So now we got to talk about it. Okay, so where's Fletcher Cox? Do you draft a kid out of USC this year if Fletcher Cox is in the long-term plan? Do you draft, Milton Williams in the third round if Fletcher Cox isn't in your long-term plans? So all of these things are up for debate and up for conversation as far as when Fletcher Cox is concerned, and only time will tell. It'll be interesting to see. I know what players do when they know that their contract is coming up a year or two before then. Guess what they start to do? They start to train. They start to do the things that they need to do because they want to have that 1 or 2 good years leading into a contract year. They kind of draws the organization into believing that, hey, we can't do without that guy. Look how good he is. There's still value there. So they're not going to let that guy walk away in free agency. They're going to re-sign him to another deal, and all of a sudden they sign the deal and they exhale again. The Eagles can ill afford to do that with a Fletcher Cox. So they've got to determine in the next, in this season here, whether this is a situation that they want to extend or whether long-term they're looking at moving on from Fletcher Cox and getting younger and saving themselves some salary cap space down the road. All right. Miles Smith, he wants to know, do I think the Eagles have a chance to win a division? And what do I think of the young coaching staff? First question. I believe that the NFC East is just that bad, that what I'm seeing and what the organization has done as far as replenishing talent, creating competition in a weak division, absolutely they have a shot at winning the division. Let's look at the other 3 teams in the division. By far, I think anybody, when you look offensively, you would say that Dallas is the most talented team in the NFC Eastern Division. But yet and still, they've only won 1 division title, I think, in the last 4 or 5 years. So Jerry will find a way to say some things or do some things or create some kind of controversy. If Mike McCarthy, who is now probably on the hot seat again and under the gun, if he doesn't figure out a way to mold this talent and get them to be an offensive juggernaut, which I think they believe that they saw a little bit of that before Dak got hurt last year, that his job is going to be in jeopardy. So Jerry will do something would happen, that causes the Dallas Cowboys to falter and slip and fall. I mean, it's like like Newton's law, whatever can go wrong will go wrong with the Dallas Cowboys. You look at the New York Giants. There's tremendous pressure on one Daniel Jones this year to prove that he can be the guy. I think that, the fans, the organization, maybe even the organization are getting to a point with Daniel Jones where they want him to put up or be gone. A lot of people still question the move by Gettleman to move up and take Daniel Jones when there was other players there that, probably were better players. But time will tell. I mean, he's shown some flashes of playing some good football, but he's also played some football and left everyone with their head scratching. Going into his 3rd or 4th year, this should be the time that he steps forward. They moved up in the draft, and they drafted some players, to help them out on the offensive side of the ball. They're getting Saquon Barkley back this year, so they should be better, but they're not there. You go down to Washington, the Washington football team under Ron Rivera in year 2. In year 1, he showed a lot of promise. And with him and Jack Del Rio and what they were able to do with that defense, even though Ron Rivera, is the head coach, remember, he's a defensive-minded guy, and he brings in a guy like Jack Del Rio, who's been a head coach, who's been a defensive coordinator, has been successful in other places, and they take over a defensive line with 4 first-round draft picks on that defensive line. And trust me, they were a problem defensively for a lot of teams last year. But you got Ryan Fitzpatrick that moves over from the Miami Dolphins, who's now, your starting quarterback. You've got another young quarterback who stepped in and played admirably at the end of the season last year. But, and you've got some talent at the wide receiver position, but I don't think that you're going to have the consistency at the quarterback position, and they've got problems on the offensive line as well. When you've got those kinds of issues and those kinds of problems, you're still going to have some problems. Now, they can stop some people, but the big question is, can they score enough points, to be in and win enough games? That remains to be seen. So when you think about all of those dynamics, when you're thinking about the other 3 teams that reside in the conference, in the division, I should say, absolutely, I feel like the Eagles have an opportunity, because if the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line can stay healthy and Nick Sirianni can stay true to, how he wants to run his offense, a balanced offense, then Jalen Hurts is going to have the opportunity to succeed. And the defense always lags behind the offense when you have a new coaching staff coming in. So I expect for the Eagles offense, if the offensive line can be healthy and we can run the ball with any kind of consistency, I expect for the offense to be better than most people think. Now, the problem is going to be on the defensive side of the ball. Who can we stop? How fast can the defense catch up? They made some good moves, but the problem is when you got a new coaching staff and a lot of new players, how long does it take for cohesiveness to settle in from a defensive perspective? How do you create and talk about communication? Because on defense, if you're not communicating, if you're not talking, a lot of times that's the difference between big plays happening and big plays not happening. So those are the dynamics that you're dealing with. How long does it take for Jalen Hurts to digest this offense that Nick Sirianni has come in and said, hey, this is not necessarily my system, but what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the players that we have, and we're going to develop a system that suits their skill sets and what they do, which I think is smart. But at the same time, you've got an offensive staff that's digesting a new system in totality, even though they've all probably, had a hand in bits and pieces of it. And then how does that translate to the communication with your players and how they begin to pick it up and how they digest it and how they get to where it becomes second nature to them. All of those things will play a major role in and how fast this team, can get back to being competitive. What do I think of the young coaching staff? I think that young energy is good when you're dealing with young people. I also think that if your coaching staff is too young, that you lose something in experience. I think that there's maybe 1 or 2 coaches on this staff, Stoutland being one. I forget the other. That's that has major. When I say major years of experience. When I say major, I mean guys that are 55 or older. The rest of the coaching staff, I know one coordinator is 37, the other one's 35. You got the linebackers coach is 27 years old. If the players buy into what Nick Sirianni is selling, if they buy into and they can believe in what the coaches are teaching them, and they can see that if they do it, they can see the manifestation of success through what the coaches are coaching, then I don't think the young coaches will be a problem at all. But if doubt sets in, if the lack of buy-in ever becomes an issue for Nick Sirianni and his staff, it'll just be a matter of time before we're looking at another coaching change. I'm still of the belief, you guys have heard me say it, I just want to give the guy the opportunity to show us what he can do. I don't want to poo-poo him. I don't want to, talk about what he can't do. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I want to see how the players buy in. I want to see the systems that they put together. I want to see how he deals with adversity. I want to see how he grows as the guy that stands at the podium every Sunday night after a game and talks about, how his team came together and won a game, or how his team, failed and lost the game. Only time will tell. So let's wait and see and give them, this coaching staff, the benefit of the doubt and see where they are at the end of the day. Let's see, whatever we got. Douglas wants to know, what's your thoughts on the future of Fletcher Cox? Will he up his game? Well, I kind of talked about that a little bit, Douglas. I think he will. Most players do up their game, when it's contract time. I think that the Eagles have already set the stage, in my opinion, for what they may do with Fletcher Cox when his contract is up. Time will tell. I mean, if he has one of those years this year where, he's dominant and he's healthy throughout the year, I think, he puts tremendous pressure on the Philadelphia Eagles and their decision making. All right. Let's see. Let's talk about this one. Will Hurts shock the NFL like Shannon Sharp that keeps doubting? I'm not sure if I understand your question. Will Hurts shock the NFL like Shannon Sharp that keeps doubting him? Well, I don't listen. I will say this. Jalen Hurts is going to have his detractors and he's going to have his supporters. I think that, when you look at the media, and I'm a part of that by virtue of the show that I'm doing right now and by virtue of what I do on NBC Sports Philadelphia during the football season. We all have a job to do, and everyone has an opinion. My opinions are strong. I know Shannon is a good friend of mine, ex-teammate of mine. He's got, his own opinions. Based upon what I see out of Jalen Hurts, and based upon the things that Jalen Hurts has been through, and based upon how the rest of the players that are around him see him as a leader and how he carries himself, it's really hard for me to not believe that this guy is not going to take the next step and be a franchise quarterback. Now, hey, I could be wrong, because the one thing I can't do is I can't get inside Jalen Hurts' mind. I can't, touch his heart to see, how much of his heart is actually in this, whether he's, giving lip service when he speaks, because he certainly says all the right things. It seems like he does all the right things. But at the end of the day, I can't get inside of him to know what kind of mental fortitude and how much resiliency he has in him, and how much fight he has in him, to get the job done. So while Shannon can be is certainly entitled to his opinions about Jalen Hurts, I believe that Jalen Hurts is going to be a guy that takes the next step this year. I think he's going to make the situation extremely tough for the Philadelphia Eagles moving forward. Do we draft another quarterback, or do we ride with Jalen Hurts? So I'll just say, in my opinion, I think the guy will step up and do great things. He'll have a supporting cast around him from young receivers that can give him explosivity. I think he's going to have a healthy offensive line. He's going to have a backfield loaded with guys that are going to be competing for playing time, and, a tight end that's coming into his own. And if they don't, trade Zach Ertz, you got two weapons and 12 personnel that you can utilize. I think that the table is set for Jalen to step in and do whatever it is that he needs to do to be that guy. That's my opinion. Shannon is certainly entitled to his own. All right. Let's see. All right, Melton, you on again. You're talking about the wide receiver coach, Aaron Moorhead. You said, you watched the press conference with Aaron Moorhead, still not sold on him as a wide receivers coach. It is critical that these young guys develop in a big way, hoping I'm reading this guy the wrong way. Well, listen, I hope that you're reading him the wrong way as well. He was a holdover from Doug Peterson's staff. He was just a new wide receiver coach, I believe the fourth wide receiver coach in Doug Peters' stint as head coach in 5 years. I hope that, there was something coaching-wise that held him back from being able to develop these young guys the way that they need to be developed. Because when I look at the young wide receivers last year under Aaron Moorhead, I didn't see any change in how they ran routes. No stem at the top, no setting up routes, no head fakes, no fighting at the line of scrimmage to get off of blocks. These are things that you continuously saw from, throughout the entire year from the entire wide receiving corps. The only guy that seemed to could get open last year when he was on the field was Travis Fulgham. Everybody else, we just kept crying, our wide receivers can't get separations. Wide receivers can't get separation. Listen, there were times last year when wide receivers were open, but the quarterbacks just didn't find them or they were locking in on another guy. There were times where guys, they were not open. They could not get open. Part of getting open is just not running the route and having speed to do so or quickness to do so. But sometimes getting open is a matter of, okay, how do you run your route? If you're running an out route, do you set the guy up by driving him inside, stemming inside, and then breaking out? Or are you just going to run the route? Listen, if the wide receivers are going to run the routes the way they ran them the last 2 years, then guess what? I can throw my cleats on and get out there and cover any of our wide receivers man to man right now. Because if you're just going to run the route, all I got to do is stay on top of you and run the route with you. But how are you going to set the route up? How do you get a guy, to believe that you're going to go one way in order for you to create separation and go the other way? Now, I hope that, Aaron Moorhead adds that to his repertoire. I will say this. The addition of Devontae Smith is a major, major deal, not just because of what he's going to bring in production, but I think that when these other young wide receivers watch the way that he runs routes, because he's been coached by a wide receivers coach in Alabama that's put some first rounders out there, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. I'm sure Jerry Jeudy. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of guys. But this guy's put some wide receivers out that know how to run routes. They know how to create separation, and they know how to stem their routes at the top that allows them, to create separation. And they play with good vision, meaning that they track the ball well, whether they're catching balls down the field or whether they're catching balls in traffic. They track the ball well. They catch the ball with their hands. They're not body catchers. They catch the ball away from them and with strong hands. The other wide receivers are going to watch the way Devontae Smith runs his routes and understand that there's a better way. So maybe this is an opportunity for Aaron Moorhead to learn a little more about how you coach the position from how this kid is running routes, and that can translate into how he actually coaches the rest of these wide receivers. I don't know what he said, Lawrence, in the press conference that you weren't overly impressed with, his comments. But he's going to be the wide receivers coach in 2021 for the Philadelphia Eagles. So he better figure out a way to help make these guys better, to train them and give them the tools and the toolbox that's necessary for them to step up and realize their potential. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Let me go back. Stephen Michael Puga wants to know, which other rookie other than Devontae Smith do you have your eye on this season? Believe it or not, I like the Eagles draft. I like the players that they picked up. The player that I'm most excited about is the kid they drafted, I believe, in the 7th round out of LSU, Jacoby. His last name is leaving me at the moment, but what I like when I watch this kid play on film is that he plays at just another level. The Eagles drafted him as a linebacker, which kind of made me scratch my head because when I watched him on film, he played all over the place. I mean, he played safety. He played in the slot. He played corner. He dropped in the box. Jacoby Stevens. Thanks, Jeff Sachs. I'm really excited to see how they use him. And I want to see him on the field. I want to see him playing 100 miles an hour because I think that he's going to be the hidden gem that the Eagles found in this draft that no one – and probably what happened was maybe teams designated him as a linebacker. He only weighs 212 pounds. I mean, how much linebacker are you going to be able to play at 212 pounds? Now, you can line a guy up in half coverage, and once the quarterback gets in his cadence, you can drop him in the box as a box player, as an eighth man in the box. But if you're going to line him up, at linebacker every single play, you're daring offenses not to game plan, how you attack him. But I think that he's going to be the unsung rookie in this draft class. Listen, we have an expectation for Devontae Smith. There's no doubt about that. We expect for him to come in and do big things. But when you're a 7th round draft pick, I know because I was an 8th round draft pick, there's not a whole lot that's expected of you. So when he comes in and he starts to play like I anticipate that he might play, he's going to shake some things up. But I'm excited to see, what he can become. And, he played a complicated position at LSU and was highly successful. That leads me to believe that he's a smart player, meaning that whatever they put on his plate here for the Philadelphia Eagles, that he can be versatile enough to play single high safety, 2 high safety, play on the slot wide receiver. If they need to, line him up on a running back, and what teams are loving to do now, a la Alvin Kamara, line him up in the backfield, create the mismatch, motion him out to wide receiver, and run him on a route. Jacoby Stevens can be that guy. If Wilson can't do it, Jacoby Stevens can be that guy that can do that. He's like a Swiss Army knife. He's a guy that can do everything. And I'm extremely excited to see this guy. I can't wait to training camp this year because I want to see this guy. I want to see what he looks like in person. I want to see his intensity on the field because if what I saw on film translates to what he can be for the Philadelphia Eagles, they got a steal. They got an absolute steal in this kid. All right. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see. Let's go. Jerry Armitage. Jerry says the best possible outcome is Hurts as a franchise quarterback. If any fan roots against him to succeed, they don't deserve to wear the colors. Well, I tend to believe, I tend to agree with you. There's a little bit of Jalen Hurts going on in Eagle land. There is, in my opinion, a faction of, Eagles fans that are still upset with the pick and still upset that Carson Wentz is no longer the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. But I always thought and I always believed that, if you put on the Eagle uniform, that the fans back whoever that starter is, whoever that special teams player is that's out there laying it on the line. I think it is the best, best case scenario for the Eagles because when were the Eagles actually in the best position to be able to build their roster? When they had a quarterback that was still in his rookie contract. Things got dicey. when the Eagles had to all of a sudden begin to start paying Carson Wentz $30+ million. Now, Howie had made a mess of the salary cap before that, but I think, now we're in a situation where there's going to be, in the next 2 years, some major contracts coming off the books. You're still going to have Jalen Hurts, in his rookie deal. And then by the time some of those contracts fall off, you're still going to have cap space. Like next year, going to next year, the Eagles going to have $60-70 million in cap space next year, along with potentially 3 first-round draft picks. You talk about getting well real quick. That's what's going to happen with this organization, especially if a Jalen Hurts can step into that role as franchise quarterback, with potentially 2 years or 3 years remaining on his rookie deal. And as a second-round quarterback, I mean, you're not talking about a whole bunch of money, but the flexibility that he gives the organization, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. But hey, Jerry, the Eagles fans are going to be Eagles fans, and they're going to root for who they want to. But I agree with you 100%. If you're not rooting for the guy, you don't deserve to, wear the Eagles colors, in my opinion. All right. Let's see. Scroll on down here. I'm going to debate Alexis rather. Alexis says Hurts is not a franchise quarterback. The next time we have a talk to him, Tuesday, Alexis, I would love to send you a link and have you come on and explain to me, or maybe in the comments below, explain to me what makes you so sure that Jalen Hurts is not a franchise quarterback. Okay. I mean, the kid came in last year, no OTAs, no training camp, no preseason, and gets thrown into the mix with 4 games in week 14. Okay. And you're going to just out of the blue tell me or make a comment that he's not a franchise quarterback? What quarterback did you draft, in year one that you make the assessment that he is or he is not a franchise quarterback? To my point about Nick Sirianni, give the guy a chance. I'll make the same assertion about Jalen Hurts. Give the guy a chance. Okay? There's a lot that you could be excited about Jalen Hurts last year, and there's some stuff that you could not be excited about Jalen Hurts, last year. But the same things that plagued one Carson Wentz last year were the same things that plagued Jalen Hurts at the end of last year. Okay? But there's no levity there. We don't want to talk about, that. We don't even want to look forward to 2021 and give this guy with a new line, with a new coaching staff, okay, with more weapons on the outside, the benefit of the doubt that he possibly could be. I'm not saying that he is, okay, but I in no way would ever assume to say what someone can't be until they prove to me what they can or what they can't be, okay? That's my position on it. All right. All right, Emilio, let's do it. Emilio says, can we truly be talking about winning the division when you yourself used the word rebuild? Okay. I did. You're 100% correct. When the Philadelphia Eagles decided to move on from Doug Peterson, when the Philadelphia Eagles decided to trade one Carson James Wentz, I said that the Philadelphia Eagles are in rebuild mode. You're 100% correct. But let's go back and look at what's transpired since then. Okay. You got a new coaching staff. Okay. You've got a stable of running backs, potentially, 2 really good tight ends. You've got talent now, major talent at the wide receiver position. Okay. And you got a young quarterback that showed flashes. You've reinvigorated the defensive side of the ball. You brought in competition in the secondary, which means that the cream's going to rise to the top and you're going to get the best players at all positions. You've upgraded the linebacker position, and you've got some young guys who've yet to even show what it is that they can and they cannot do. And you severely upgraded a defensive line that needed it across the board at all positions. Okay. Now, let's talk about the rest of the division. I broke them down earlier in the show. Tell me what you see in the Dallas Cowboys with that defense last year. Okay. Tell me what you see in the Washington football team with that offense last year. And my goodness, please tell me what you see in the New York Giants that leads you to believe that the Eagles are so far-fetched and so far out of the realm of being able to compete and win the division. Now, I didn't say, hey, they're a shoo-in to win it, but I don't see anybody else that's a shoo-in to win it either. And with that being the scenario, with the Washington football team stumbling into the playoffs last year with a 7-9 record, hey, it's not that far beyond the imagination that 9-7 or 8-8 would win the division again this year. So you're going to tell me that with the Philadelphia Eagles, with the easiest schedule in the NFL this year, don't have a shot at winning the NFC East? Yeah, I said rebuild, but I'm being realistic about what I see in the rest of the division as well. And that's not even being biased or being a homer. That's just the plain, straight truth. All right. Rob Friedman wants to know, how concerned are you with the defense? They seem to lack talent at the linebacker and secondary. And if the pass rush isn't strong, we could give up 30 points a game. Thoughts? Okay. I would say that, about last year's defense. I would say that about a Jim Schwartz, bend but don't break coach defense. I'm going to give Gannon the benefit of the doubt. I'm excited about what they've done depth-wise on the defensive line. I'm excited about, what they've created, the competition that they've created. Listen, Alex Singleton is going to be better than he was last year. TJ Edwards is now in a competition situation. You go and you bring in, Wilson from Minnesota. He's going to be your number one linebacker. You've got Bradley. You've got Taylor, guys who haven't even had an opportunity to show what they could do, because instead of Jim Schwartz giving them some playing time last year, he just decided that, when they're ready, they'll play. Nonsense. You're losing. The team isn't going anywhere. Start playing some of these young guys and give them some experience that they weren't able to get because there was no preseason. So the defense is going to look different with a different mentality, with, some different leaders on the defensive side of the ball. Potentially, could linebacker and secondary still be a problem? Yes. Could pass rush still be a problem? Yes. But at the other end of the spectrum, it could be a major upgrade, what we've been able to see this team actually do. So, let's see where it goes. I mean, it's going to take time for us to really understand and know what this team will look like. And a lot of people want to make predictions, and a lot of people want to make assessments. It's too early for that. We don't even know what type of offense, the Eagles are going to run. We don't even know what kind of defense the Philadelphia Eagles are going to run. We don't even know what kind of special teams, we're going to have. How do you make assessments until you know that? How do you know that we're going to give up 30 points a game until you see what this new defensive structure looks like? Maybe they're more pressure than Jim Schwartz were. Maybe the competition brings out the best in enough players that you begin to see, a rise in, the level of play. Only time will tell. All right. Damon Rose wants to know, who plays linebacker alongside Eric Wilson, the free agent signee from Minnesota. I think that, the competition will be pretty staunch, but I think right now out the gate, you got to give Alex Singleton, the nod after what you saw him do last year in his limited role as a starter. All right. Let's see. What else we got here? Some of you guys, y'all are having these conversations on here. You're killing me because I can't find the questions. Let's see. All right, let's keep it here at the linebackers. Damon Rose wants to know: do you think Davion Taylor will make strides in his second year? I think it's a learning curve for a lot of players. I mean, if you don't come in with confidence and your coaches don't know how to build that confidence in you, it's kind of hard for you to take the next step. A lot will depend on with the new linebackers coach, how he kind of nurtures these guys and brings them along. We'll see. We'll see. Listen, Davion Taylor was a guy, when I looked at his college film, he was another fast linebacker that was just all over the place. When you know a system and you know what your responsibilities are and you know what you're supposed to do, you can play fast. When you don't know, you're always a step or two behind. Maybe he could just never get there in year one. And I don't know what the dynamics are. Was the system that complicated that he couldn't learn it? Was he not putting in the time to learn it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the dynamics were. But any player who's had a tough rookie year, and you could see the talent, I look forward to how that talent manifests itself in year two, how you find your confidence, how you train your body to be ready to play the game, at the elite level. Sometimes confidence is the toughest thing in any sport. If you can have it and not have talent and it not mean a hill of beans, you're just selling a bunch of wolf tickets. But you can also be a supreme athlete and not have it and not really realize your potential. The greatest athletes, in my opinion, are the guys who have potential, who know that they have talent, that step out on the field, on the court with the ultimate confidence because they feel like they can't be stopped. If you don't believe and you don't think that way, it's really tough for you, to develop into the player that, potentially teams might believe that you could be. All right. Let's see. Emilio, one more time. Your question is, do you think it's best to come in with a system, then shape the roster around your system, or mold the system around the players you have? I think that the smartest thing that Nick Sirianni did was came in and said, hey, we don't really have a system. What we're going to do is we're going to get these players in here. We're going to meet them. We're going to get to know them. We're going to evaluate them. We're going to see what they do best. And from there, we're going to, develop and build a system around the players that we have. Unless you're an organization that's really, really good at drafting, to me, that's the way you do it. If you're a defensive coordinator that's flexible, that's multiple, that can adjust. I played under Buddy Ryan, and he had a system that he brought from Chicago. But what Buddy was great at, he was a great talent evaluator. And what he did was he went out and he handpicked almost every player on that defense through the draft or a free agent player here or there. But there's very few organizations that do it that way. Bill Belichick, he's old school. He's a guy that, when he's developing and he's drafting these players, he knows what he wants to run. And he knows and understands the type of players that are necessary for success within his system. So that's what he goes out and that's what he drafts. I think that we're in a different era of team building and team development in the NFL. Now, I think a lot of these GMs don't really have an idea collaboratively with their coordinators on how to go out and get players that fit what it is that they're trying to do. So a lot of times what you see is, organizations and coaches fail, because they don't have that dynamic. They don't have that ability to draft the players that fit what they do. Or you got a GM that's making decisions and bringing in guys that supposedly fit what he thinks you do, and that guy can't play dead within the system that you're running. So now you got to figure out how to coach a guy that doesn't fit what you do. You know, it's a tough dynamic, but I think that the best way to do it, if you have the wherewithal, is to in today's NFL, with free agency being what it is, you get great players, that fit kind of what it is that you think you want to do, and then you morph and you transform that system to fit all the abilities of the players that you have. Like if you got a fast team, you got fast linebackers and fast defensive backs, we'll get you some big bodies up front to eat up blockers. Let those guys run to the ball and make plays. If you got bigger linebackers that are extremely physical, now you can play your defensive line in a way where you're stunting and slanting them, and you're doing some different things with them. You're moving them, and the offensive line thinks that a guy's lined just because he's lined up there, he's going to be there. But when you change where he is, it screws up, the blocking scheme. Well, now if you got fast linebackers and those guys are moving, or hitter linebackers, as I call them, these guys are getting in the backfield and creating havoc and forcing plays, cutting off a play from any kind of cutback. That play has to manifest itself play side all the time. Now you got guys that know where they fit, what their responsibilities are, and they just run and making plays. It just all depends on the mentality of the coach and the ability of the GM to be able to draft the players that fit certain styles and certain systems. Excuse me. Jim Scott wants to know, do you think Ryan Kerrigan will be a big impact on defense as a situational player? Hey, listen, he's at the tail end of his career. Jack Del Rio and both Ron Rivera said last year that he was going to be a situational player for them. I think he'll be that here. I think that he could do for the Philadelphia Eagles pass rush what we saw Chris Long do for the Philadelphia Eagles pass rush for 2 years. Not a guy that has to play or needs to play every single down, but a guy that has enough experience that when you call upon him in a crucial situation, that he can go in and get the job done. All right. One more question goes to you, Adam. Adam said, if you were GM, would you have done the deal for the same price that was paid for Julio? Well, that question, that all depends on, which GM. Listen, the GM for the Atlanta Falcons had to move him. He pretty much said, I'm not taking a pay cut. So, with the salary cap situation being the way that it is, it was a deal that had to be done. You're not going to keep Julio Jones and have, Kyle Pitts, who you picked with the 4th pick overall, and some of the other salary cap issues. You got a quarterback that's, still making franchise money. Something had to be done. Somebody had to go, and Julio was the guy. Now, if I'm the GM for the Tennessee Titans, my big question is, do I think we're that one player away from winning the Super Bowl? Does that player get us over the hump? If the question is yes, then I do the deal, because there's going to be some salary cap ramifications to this deal for the Tennessee Titans. So when you make a deal like that, you're basically saying, I'm giving this team a 2-year window to win the Super Bowl, because this is the player that helps us get over the hump. If that's the case, yes. Then, and if it doesn't work out, then that's a situation that the GM of the Tennessee Titans is going to have to live with and deal with, down the road, salary cap wise. All right. Well, guys, that's it for today. I thank you all for the questions. I will be back next week. I got an interesting guest for you guys next week. Make sure you follow the promos. It's going to be fun. It's going to be controversial. And it's going to be informative. Make sure you guys tune in next week. Well, like I always say, be good to each other and take care of each other. But most importantly, make sure you love each other. I will see you guys right back here next week on the Seth Joyner Show. Not only will I have a good guest for you, but next week we will do a giveaway, a helmet, signed autograph Eagles helmet, signed autograph Eagles football, and the logo that you see up in the top corner, that's me. I'll be giving away one of my Seth Joyner hats next week. All right. I'll see you guys right back here. Same time, same place. Peace. Take care.